And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. Energy tomorrow starts today. This is the tagline for Orlen's updated 10-year-long business strategy to revamp Poland's largest energy company. The state-owned enterprise has ambitious and multifaceted plans to bring in the profits, pay out the dividends, and also meet the energy demands Poland and the region faces. To tell us more about today's big announcements, we are joined by Jonathan Lamb, oil and gas analyst at Wood & Co. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I wanted to begin by asking you of your impressions of the Orlen strategy. Some of the words that come to mind are multi-pronged, ambitious, some might say unrealistic, but there are thoughts of a rational transformation and business acceleration, but perhaps it's too much to launch into?
Well, first of all, I don't think the huge change in overall strategy from what was being done under the old management. And you have to understand that a company like Orlen, which it has a very carbon intensive business, needs to create a new business for the future with lower carbon, and also being the largest energy group in Poland, and Poland has very big ambition to decarbonize its energy sector. It kind of has a role as the big state-controlled energy company to play a big part in that. So the group is already a very diversified group with upstream, downstream energy, gas trading, and it's building on those blocks, particularly investing a lot of money in the renewable energy side of the business. But at the same time, they need to continue to invest in the long-term running of the core traditional businesses. So or may not be too ambitious. It's very large sums of money that are being talked about, but to some extent, Orlen doesn't have very many other options. They have to go down this kind of path if they're going to create an energy company that has a long-term sustainable future.
So you're essentially saying that they have to move forward with the times. There is no other option for them, but there is a huge amount of money that is being put into implementing this strategy. What kind of risks are associated with this size of a strategy, with the amount of money that's being put into it?
Well, the biggest risk in any kind of investment strategy is on the execution side. And we've previously, with their big Olefins project, which was launched as a 13 billion zloty project about years ago, and it turned into a 40 billion zloty project because of cost inflation. Things like this can happen, and I think these areas where investors tend to be very worried, because if you look at what management is saying today, we're going to spend this much money and our earnings are going to go up by this much. If everything goes to plan, then fine, we have a bigger company that's making more profits at the end. But if there's problems with the execution, if things cost more than they expected them to cost, if they take longer to make than they were expected to do, then the returns to investors could be significantly less than what was expected at the time of the plan. And even the best plan can go awry sometimes.
Sure. In regards to Olefiny 3, which you just brought up, obviously a very hot topic here in the media here in Poland, as is Orlen, obviously. In line with the announcements of this strategy, how soon or when and how could we see the impact of this strategy on this petrochemical branch of Orlen?
Well, they've said that the revamp project, which has been shrunk from the original one, in a previous announcement, I think back in December, they said that they weren't going to start it for 2 or 3 years. So it's not until after 2030 that we'd actually see the new plant coming on stream. And it's not for a couple of years before we actually start to see some significant additional expenditure. Obviously, there's been some already. So that's not in terms of timing, it's not the priority right now.
And in terms of The regional size, obviously, Orlen is huge, and I have a sense that it also wants to position itself as quite the energy leader, both obviously in Poland, but also in the region. To what extent is your impression that Orlen can perhaps shape the direction of renewable energy and the development of energy, sustainable energy over the next few years, both domestically and regionally, keeping in mind that we live in times where energy volatility is something that's very much at the top of everybody's minds?
Well, I think a significant proportion of the strategy is very similar to what many other companies are doing. So generally moving into renewable energy generation like wind and solar, putting more emphasis on biofuels, particularly for sustainable aviation fuel, that kind of thing. One area where I think Orlen maybe has a little bit of an edge compared to many of its competitors is actually offshore wind. So there's been very little development in offshore wind in the Baltic. We have a lot of offshore wind in the north. The Baltic is kind of it's a blank page, and there's a lot of potential there. And the beauty of offshore wind, more expensive than onshore, is that the wind is often blowing when it's not blowing onshore, and the overall utilization of these assets tends to be quite a lot higher. So that's something I think that differentiates them from many of the other companies in the region, other than the fact extremely large, so their impact on the business is bigger than some of their smaller regional competitors.
And what about the share price, which has plummeted over the past few years? Obviously, their highest share price was actually before 2020, and upon announcing this new strategy, there was actually a little bit of a dip in the share price today. How soon, in your experience, do you think that Orlen could perhaps recover its share price?
Well, I think there's two issues right now. So a lot of the companies that I look at that have similar business models, at least partially to Orlen, in the last year or two, they've been trading at very low multiples. So there's been a general feeling among investors that they don't really want to invest in energy companies. I think because refining margins have been declining, oil prices have looked weak, petrochemicals has been under a lot of pressure. So there's a general sectoral thing. Mm-hmm. But when we went through the whole energy crisis, 2022, 2023, governments brought in a lot of windfall taxes and price controls and things. And that made a lot of investors somewhat allergic to this sector as well. So I think we need a period of maybe normality where there isn't the distortions, where investors can see what these companies can actually perform at before they will reevaluate them. So, perhaps later in this year, the investment community will have taken a second look and reevaluated some of the factors around this company and its peers.
But do you think that this is something that Orlen will be able to succeed in doing? They're keen to pay out dividends. They feel pretty confident, I think, that they can succeed in revamping and changing Orlen's image.
It all depends on delivering the results. So we'll see next month how well they did in the fourth quarter. The distortions that we had in the first half of 2024 are no longer with us, the extra windfall taxes on the upstream. So I would expect 2025 to see a good sets of results because we don't have that. Mm-hmm. So I don't see why management shouldn't be able to gradually change people's perception. It's about, execution. It's about delivering.
Absolutely. Okay, Jonathan Lamb, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And we were joined by Jonathan Lamb, Oil and Equity Analyst from Wood & Co. Thank you so much for joining us today. I was your host, Marie Cato. Join us every weekday for Business Arena at 5 p.m. CET on TVP World. And for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. And for more news and features, stay with us on TVP World. Goodbye.